I just had a blitz game where I was able to save a half a point or secure a draw very easily without even really having to think at all, just by knowing a simple practical endgame technique. And that endgame involved a bishop and a rook pawn versus my lone king. At least that was the position I steered it for. And these positions are actually really easy. And what I want to do is just show a couple examples of a position where white can win if they have the extra material, and a position where they cannot win even though they have the extra material. And then we'll look at one little subtle thing that can happen in these positions. And then I'll just show this end game where I was able to, without hardly any time on my clock, to just easily save the half point. So the key to these positions where you have a bishop and a rook pawn versus a lone king is to look at the color of the bishop and compare that to the square where the rook pawn will queen. So if we compare the color of these two squares, they're both light squared, and because of that, white can easily win this position. And that is because this bishop can control that queening square of the pawn. And so in this position, it's very easy for white to win. They just put the bishop on that diagonal that controls the queening square, and then just shove the pawn and queen it. Very simple. So, voila. You just create a queen, all because this colored bishop is on the same color as the queening square, and that's just a real easy, clear-cut win for the side with the extra material. Now, unfortunately, in this case for white, they cannot win this position because in this position they have a dark squared bishop, and the color of the queening square for the pawn is a light square. So they cannot use their bishop to help control that queening square and keep the black king off of that queening square. So it's actually very easy for black to draw this position. All he does is just hides in the corner. So no matter what white tries to do, as long as he knows to just sit in the corner, and whenever he can just sit there in the corner, he's fine. So let's say white just pushes the pawn. The key is to keep contact with the corner. And then he's able to just run in the corner. And white here doesn't really have a good move. Like if he moves here, it's stalemate. If he moves away, then black can just sit here and then just keep bouncing to the corner. He doesn't have any way to make any progress in this position. So knowing that, if you get in a position, an endgame, you may be able to steer for this type of position where you force your opponent to get a rook pawn as their extra pawn and have it be on the file where the queening square is the opposite color of your bishop. And so it can save you a lot of half points if you just know this simple rule. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just look at how this came up in my game, and then we'll look at a little bit more of a complicated way to win this position, sometimes when you do have the incorrect bishop. We'll go through that then, but that involves if you can keep the opponent's king from getting to the corner. But the game that I had in blitz, I got to this position here, and I had 40 seconds, and the opponent had 50 seconds, and his bishop is covering these two squares, so I'm going to lose this pawn, which means that I'm also going to lose this pawn because I'm not going to be able to get my king over there to cover it. So the key is to just know to look at the color of that bishop. Note the fact that he only has a rook pawn remaining, and that this bishop is not the same color of the queening square of this pawn. So all I have to do at black is just run my king to the corner. And that's how the game went. I just ran for the corner. And then I just shuffle back and forth and just sit in the corner. And like, you don't even really have to even hardly think. Like, I only have one square here to go to. And then I can get myself in this position where I'm going to be stalemated. Or else he's going to have to just move his king away. He ended up moving there, so then I just move here. Eventually he's going to trap me a stalemate, or we're just going to repeat positions and make a bunch of meaningless moves. So that's an easy way to save a half a point in a lot of games, and I've had that come up a number of times actually. And sometimes, you can steer for it. When you're trying to calculate, what you want to do or assess what you want to do in a position, you might be able to figure out a way to save a half a point by sacrificing a piece to make the remaining pawn be a rook pawn and leave them with that bishop of the wrong color. Now, there is one weird kind of exception where if we glance at this position, at first glance, we may think, okay, well, it seems to me that this is just a draw. Black can just get in the corner, and because this is a light squared bishop and the queening square is on a dark square, it's going to be drawn. But sometimes you can actually prevent the king from getting to the corner if you play just perfectly cutting the king off. And so in this case, we could actually win this as white by cutting off the king's route over to this h8 square. So what we would do here is then we can push the pawn, and black can't take the pawn because he can't get back in time, or we would queen. So he cannot take that bishop. So about the best he could do is maybe king f6, and then we use the same kind of idea. We take away this square, pawn takes away that square. He still can't do this, or the pawn is just going to queen. So then we can set up this little kind of like barricade where we use the pawn and the bishop to prevent the king from getting over to the corner. And so if our king is close enough that we can cut the black king off and prevent the black king from getting to this g5 square to eat our pawn, then we're all set. We're set to go. There's just nothing that white can do here. Eventually, we'll get into a position like this where we can get the opposition and cut off all the squares for the king so that the black king is just forced to give ground, and then we can just gain control of the queening square with our king and then just shove it through and win. So it's a really easy end game, but just knowing it cold can save you a lot of games, because then you can just glance at it. You don't have to calculate. You can just know, hey, I'm going to be able to save this. Or conversely, you may not want to enter a position if the other side has this defensive resource where they can be 4 whole points of material down but still hold a draw, which is kind of cool. And anytime you have a rook pawn on the board, you got to be just kind of aware that there could be these exceptions in place where you're not going to be able to win just for the simple fact that you have a rook pawn. So anyway, hope you found that useful. Have a good one.